Every preacher wants to bring his A game every time he delivers a sermon. He has spent hours in the development stage of this message. He has prayed, he has studied, and now's the time to bring this sermon to the audience. What could possibly go wrong? What many preachers fail to recognize is the battle is just beginning. The task of sermon development may be daunting to some, and when the sermon is finished on paper, there's a tendency to think that the hard part is now over. But the battle's far from over. Stay tuned. Today, we're talking about preaching with a clear mind. Today, I'd like to talk about a clear mind. In a previous video, I spoke of the importance of sermon preparation, and you can find the link to that video in the description below. But having a clear mind is also important. There have been many times when preachers have stepped into their pulpit and their focus is not what it should be. Perhaps they're thinking about the temperature in the auditorium, or perhaps they're looking and seeing people that should be there that aren't there. Sometimes you've just gotten some bad news just a moment ago, and you're still trying to process that while delivering the sermon. Every preacher I know can relate to this. In fact, I'd be interested to hear your experience. Do me a favor and leave a comment below. Tell me something that you've had to deal with prior to delivering that sermon, and tell me how that you were able to deal with that. Today, I'd like to walk you through my process. This is what works for me. Let me begin by saying that I get to church early. I get to church real early. I don't like rushing to get things done prior to the service. And if something unexpected comes up, if I'm early, I have plenty of time to deal with whatever that is. I also spend a lot of time in the office. I make my office my sanctuary. What do you mean by that, preacher? Well, I go into that office and I close that door, and I make that my place of personal worship. It's my time to spend with me and my Lord. I'll begin to pray. I'll pray that God will give me power to preach this message. I'll pray that God will give me the clear mind that I'm going to need to adequately deliver His message. And then I will go over my sermon notes in detail. Remember, I'm already in a spirit of prayer and worship. And what better way to go over your sermon notes than to go over it with your Lord? This is so vitally important for me, and sometimes I'll even review those notes audibly. I want to make sure me and Jesus are on the same page. This is a time that I protect the best that I can. I'll stay in that office until about 20 minutes prior to the service beginning, and then I'll walk out and begin to greet our folks. Secondly, train your congregation. Greeting people can be an obstacle to the clear mind, but it's an obstacle that is necessary. Every preacher has been given bad news just moments before the service starts, and that becomes a hindrance to your clear mind. You get into the pulpit and you're trying to process their information while delivering a sermon, and it's very, very unnecessary. That could be avoided by simply training your people. For example, whatever news that somebody wants to share with you probably did not happen within the last hour. What has happened is More than likely, they went to the doctor on Thursday. And on Thursday, the doctor gave them some bad news. And instead of calling you on Thursday, they decided to wait until 5 minutes prior to you getting into the pulpit to share that with you. And you're trying to process that at the same time as you're preaching. Most people do not understand the moment that a preacher steps behind that pulpit, he is entering into a spiritual battle that they have never ever experienced, and it is a battle that has to be won. You've got to be on your game. So train your people not to become an hindrance during that time. Train them so that they know that this is a very, very important time in this spiritual warfare. Thirdly, train yourself. Once you begin to preach, there will be a multitude of things that can and will happen that will throw you off. Perhaps somebody will leave the auditorium unexpectedly, or somebody's child will pick that moment to become unruly. Or perhaps as you're looking out at the congregation, you can see a husband and wife that had just had a fight on the way to church, and they're sitting on the pew and they're scowling at each other and not listening to a single thing that you're saying. Those things happen, and you can't control those things. You've got to train yourself to stay focused. You have got to train yourself to stay within the framework of the sermon that you are trying to deliver. I trust that this video has been a help to you today. I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the distractions that you've had to encounter as you preached your message? Leave some comments below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. In fact, subscribe to this channel. If you'll subscribe to the channel, you'll be notified every time a new video is uploaded. It's my prayer that God will bless you and that your next sermon will be the best sermon you've ever preached.